Good evening and welcome back to Town Talk. I'm your host Carr and I'm interviewing Mike Carr today. So Mike, you're a self-proclaimed math geek. Tell me, what got you into math?
What got me into math? Well, what else is there? What else is there to really pursue and be passionate about than mathematics? I was a geeky kid. I wore big aviator photogray glasses. I was asthmatic as a young child, so from about 5 on, 5 was the first time I was in the hospital for my asthma. About 2/3 lung capacity, so I'm not allowed to participate in physical education. So essentially I needed something. I needed something that I was going to be passionate about. And for me, math filled that void. And I found out that once I got involved with it, that all these hours I spent indoors and all these hours that I spent not being able to play with the other kids, that I immersed myself in numbers and algebras and all sorts of beautiful things. And I found I was quite good at it. I was a prodigy. I participated in math competitions years before I should have been eligible to participate in math competitions. I've done at least 8 national math competitions that I'm aware of, as well as the Putnam at university level. And it just filled something for me. It filled a void that I had, that I needed to have filled. So math for me was something I was good at. They always say that you're passionate about what you're good at and you're good at what you're passionate about, and math happened to be both for me.
Fantastic. On your website it says your areas of expertise are abstract algebra and graph theory. What exactly does that mean in layman terms?
I think graph theory would probably be the easier of those two to explain. So I like mathematics that any child can understand and participate in. So graph theory essentially is the concept that you have a bunch of vertices and lines. So you've got a kid with a crayon and they've got some figure on the ground, so a triangle and some circles. And you start looking at things like, is it connected? Can they draw it without lifting up the crayon? What properties do these things have? What can you infer from that? Does direction matter or not? You can do all sorts of really interesting things. It has all sorts of connotations in higher level mathematics, but just the structure of it, and something that you can explain to a small child and put the Konigsberg bridges down and have them draw the path. These things fascinated me as a kid. I always wanted to understand, why is it that you can draw some things but not others? Why is it that you have to lift the pen up, and how can you tell? How can you tell just by looking at it whether or not you can draw it or not? For me, that was always fascinating. Abstract algebra is a little bit more ethereal. I think it would be a bit harder to explain, but it's essentially, if you take the normal mathematics of physics and statistics and all those things that you learn, area of a triangle, all that stuff, abstract algebra looks at kind of the abstract ways that things fit together. So why is it that 1 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 1? And why is it that when you multiply it over brackets, it spreads out? Why do these things hold? Most people don't question these things, but mathematicians find very profound truths in investigating these. And I find it fascinating. It bears no resemblance to real numbers or real situations, except in an intangible sense. But it has a certain beauty to it that you just can't see in physics or in business, for example. It's beautiful in and of itself.
Fascinating. I've heard you mention that arithmetic and mathematics are different entirely. How is this so?
That's a good question. I often have people confuse the two. So they say that because I've studied mathematics, because I'm a math prodigy, I must necessarily be good at adding numbers together or multiplying numbers together or any of these sorts of things. Now, that is not the case. And the argument that I basically make is that arithmetic is such a small part of mathematics in the grand scheme of things. Yes, you need to know the basic fundamentals of how to add and how to multiply and how to subtract and how to divide and all those sorts of things. But in a day-to-day sense, when you're actually sitting and studying these things, you don't really need to be able to total things on your hand. You don't need to be able to work out, what my share of the tip is going to be when I go to a restaurant, for example. These things do not matter in terms of studying the art of it. We don't criticize Picasso for not being particularly good at trimming his brushes. We look at the art, we look at the product, not at the individual mechanical steps that lead up to it. So to me, arithmetic is such a small part of mathematics, and to be honest, the most boring and mundane part, the least enjoyable part for me.
How do you figure fields of mathematics are relevant to the average Joe? For example, graph theory.
Well, I mean, if we're going to be honest with each other, I don't really think that it is relevant for most people, unless you happen to live in a city where everything is a grid and you want to know, is it the same thing to go north and then east, or east and then north in terms of distance traveled? I mean, to be honest with you, graph theory doesn't bear a lot of relevance to most people most of the time. It's one of these kind of esoteric little topics that math geeks, and we are all math geeks, whether we have BScs or PhDs, that it's just one of these things that we're passionate about and we're interested in because it doesn't bear any relevance to the real world. It's abstract and wonderful just because it doesn't have anything to do with anything. It isn't practical. It isn't something that your boss is going to bring you in and, oh, I heard you're good at graph theory. How about you help us with this problem that we're facing in our business? I mean, it really doesn't, but it's just wonderful for the sake of being wonderful. It's like doing chalk art but never selling it. It doesn't matter that you're never going to sell it and make any money off it. That's not what the point of it is. The point of it is art for art's sake, essentially.
And you say you've tutored previously. I know the old expression says the best way to learn is to teach. Is this true in your case?
Oh, and undoubtedly. I've learned more from tutoring students, whether people that were gifted and quite a few of the people I've tutored have gone on and got their own PhDs at this point. I've tutored everybody from, I used to tutor the high school jocks. I mean, most of the geeks in my school would get beaten up and harassed and stuffed into lockers. I used to tutor them, quite literally. I used to take them aside and say, hey, you know what, let me help you with your homework. Let me help you understand how this complicated physics thing relates to how an engine runs, for example, because that was one that a lot of them would understand. People will understand the differential in a car before they'll understand differential mathematics. That just boggles my mind personally. But they do. They understand when they turn around a quarter, one wheel slows down, one wheel spins up. It's odd. I mean, why can't you look at the beauty of mathematics? I don't know. But for me, I learned as much from that by helping people, the world kind of responds to you, that you're not a target, that you're not somebody that's going to get beaten up and picked on and all that sort of stuff. And I had quite a pleasant high school, to be honest with you, and I had quite a pleasant experience at university. I've learned more from teaching people the most basic, fundamental, boring things than I have from the best books of mathematics, honestly.
So you've mentioned art quite a bit. A lot of people would argue that art and math are complete opposite. There's no way of reconciling the two. How do you reconcile them?
Well, I personally think that they're applications of the same thing. Look at all the mathematics that goes into music, for example, of tonality and tempo and cadence and all those sorts of things. If you want a practical example or one that most people are aware of and can relate to, look at Escher. Look at the mathematics that were involved with, the stairs that hook into each other and Mobius strips, and look at Mandelbrot, just recently passed away, of course. Look at fractals and the beauty in a fractal and how you can use it to simulate a cloud, and that a cloud zoomed out to 1 mile and a cloud zoomed in to 1 centimeter share the same common properties, look the same on a fundamental level, and both can be simulated in a computer. That's just amazing. It's a chaotic system, and yet it's predictable on some level. It's beautiful. I know it probably sounds like I'm just spouting math jargon and what have you, but math truly is beautiful. Once you understand that the universe is this complex analog system of equations and differentials. How can you catch a ball when somebody throws it to you? Do you know the mathematics involved in the kinetics of a ball traveling through the air, and air friction, and the compensation for your muscles having to, electrical impulses go through there? You don't think about it, but there is so much art that goes on in just speaking that I don't understand how everybody can't see it that way. I'm sorry to say.
All right, thank you, Mike. It's been great having you.
Thank you.